Tech companies are burning through more cash right now than America can. Sorry about that. Tech companies are burning through more cash right now than America spent getting to the moon. We're talking about $400 billion a year alone on AI infrastructure. That's a new Apollo program every 10 months. But here's the kicker: consumers are spending just $12 billion annually on AI services. The economic gap between Singapore and Somalia, that's the
So,
economic gap between Singapore and Somalia.
so companies like Oracle are announcing $300 billion deals with partners who literally don't have the money to pay for them, and yet their stock jumps 50% in a week. So, is this sustainable growth, or are we in the biggest bubble that we've seen since the dot-com crash? We're going to break down the data from economics, investors, and AI insiders to answer one question: Are we watching history repeat itself, and are we in a bubble?
Welcome back to the podcast where Startup Hack and I go live every Tuesday morning, where we talk about the latest AI, tech, and business news, where we try to make sense of this nonsensical spending environment, AI environment, what tech is real, what tech is fake, what money is going to be put to good use, and what money is just being used to puff their chest. So Startup Hack and every Tuesday morning, and I dive deep into these topics, and yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. So the numbers are staggering and not really in a good way. We've got massive spending, questionable deals, warning signs flashing everywhere. Some economists are calling this a boom, others calling it the biggest bubble in modern history. So we've analyzed the research, we're looking at the data, and we're going to walk you through what's really happening today. But like as always, our favorite thing is when you guys leave a comment down below. Let us know, even if you're just saying hi. That's our best compliment.
Perfect. All right. So Goldman Sachs project spending will climb another 17% in 2026, pushing the annual investment towards $800 billion by 2030. According to the Richmond Fed data, AI-related investment services as a share of GDP is approaching levels that we haven't seen since the telecom boom in the late 1990s. Data center construction is growing faster and steeper than the telecom infrastructure did during the 90s bubble, despite starting from a much lower baseline. The concentration is wild. Northern Virginia alone is seeing so much data center construction that rural areas are now surrounded by massive facilities running 24/7.
We're even seeing it here locally. So in the Mesa Gateway area of the Phoenix metropolitan area, we are seeing just major scale out, and it's tons of data centers, and they're everywhere. And a lot of this is coming because it's nearby an airport. Power is cheaper because there's a lot of different reasons here. But we're seeing a major build out here. Facebook recently, built a huge data center. This is just 5 minutes from my house, and we're seeing these. It's becoming what was farmlands everywhere is now becoming just massive constructions, and we're seeing this everywhere as we drive. McKay and I live about 7 hours away from each other, and as we drive between the two, all I see is construction everywhere we drive. There's some huge projects going on everywhere.
Yeah, go ahead. And Elon tweeted this late last night. Look what he said. Someone, Zero Hedge said, "The money is not the problem. AI is the new global arms race, and CapEx will eventually be funded by governments, US and China. If you want to know why gold, silver, Bitcoin is soaring, it's the debasement to fund the AI arms race." And Elon said, "True. That is why Bitcoin is based on energy. You can fake fiat currency. You can issue fake fiat currency, and every government in history has done so, but it is impossible to fake energy."
It's true. Energy is becoming quickly the commodity here because the amount of energy that's going to be needed to power all of these data centers is at a rate we've literally never seen. And it's going to require infrastructure build out that we've actually never seen. That's a scale of the infrastructure that is just crazy. And people in Northern Virginia are actually reporting that their electric bills have gone up 267%. Those who live within areas of those data centers. It's a very real problem.
Totally.
The problem is the consumers are paying the electricity bill. I mean, obviously these, power plant, the hosting centers are paying for it too, but it's going to affect everybody else because there's just so much demand on it.
Yeah, there really is. And I think it's going to be really interesting that energy is going to be the new currency of the world. It will be freaky when government starts spending towards the AI arms race, because at that point we're too far gone. I don't know.
Well, we're starting to see it with like this. What's it? I just
Stargate.
totally Stargate. Yeah, I wanted to say Stargate, and then that sounded wrong. The Stargate project, right? And it's kind of the government, which currently shut down because it can't even figure out how to pay for its own bills, and is already committed to spend so much money on this, and of course going to only the big players, right? This isn't going to trickle down to small players. That money is only going to be hitting to the Oracles, the OpenAIs, the the Microsofts, the big players are the ones who are going to buy to get that.
Yeah. No, energy is going to be really important, and I mean that's obvious. But it's gonna but does it create jobs? Does building these data centers create jobs? Does the construction create jobs? Is it not? Like, I know the spending to get there is crazy, but overall for the economy, does it not create more jobs?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Yes, but those jobs are also temporary, right? To build a building and then, like that's one and done kind of spending. So it's not the recurring, the data centers themselves pretty much run themselves. I mean, there are jobs to manage and run them and swap out servers and all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, these are not, it's not creating thousands of jobs, but it will create some in the areas.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's hop over to the revenue gap. So AI companies are generating roughly $60 billion in revenue this year against $370 billion in capital expenditures. That's a 6-to-1 ratio from revenue to from capex to revenue. Compare that to what we saw in the telecom bubble, where the ratio peaked at 4-to-1 and railroads 2-to-1. This is an historically insane stretch that we're seeing. American consumers are spending only $12 billion annually on AI services, while companies burn through hundreds of billions building infrastructure.
Yeah, this revenue gap is really impressive. I mean, and the thing about it is, because of the cyclical nature that we reviewed last time, to where how this funding works, is it too big to fail? That's really kind of the big question. Everybody's saying, is this is too big to fail? Yeah. So this is a new figure. We shared one last week, and this is even a newer, more complex one. And even as of last night, there's another player into the middle of this that was so nebulous of an announcement that they didn't even give figures to it. But
was it the Broadcom deal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're deploying 10 gigawatts, right? That's bigger than what OpenAI and I believe AMD just did, right?
So a lot of the Broadcom deal is actually around networking, right? Because that's the thing, is something's got to be able to connect all of this. And if you're moving this much, this much interconnected of finances between all of this, and so, where Elon says that the energy is the new trade, I would maybe counter with him, because I'd be curious to hear what he would think to a counter to say, I believe that the data is actually the new currency. I've actually said that for a long time. And so it's actually kind of and I'd be curious to see what Elon would say about that, because definitely he's betting on the data as well, right? I mean, there's no doubt that's why he bought X.
Yeah. This chart it continues to grow. It's its own, and then you have another, just how much OpenAI is involved in everything.
Right. So with OpenAI being the kind of the biggest linchpin in this, if they fall, which they're sitting on they're sitting on shaky grounds with the way their company is structured. The company's structure is a mess. They've been trying to make changes, but they can't, because they're an open what are they? They're not even like a 501(c)(3). They're an open consortium or something like that. It's some really weird structure.
Yeah, the fact that they haven't been able to undo it yet is pretty crazy to me. Like, because I have to think, if you got enough attorneys in a room, you could figure it out. But
no, because at this point, every dollar that comes into it makes it more complicated. So the more complicated these charts get, the more complicated unwinding that's going to be.
Yeah, I truly don't know, because OpenAI will never be able to go public unless they can unwind that. And I don't know if that's a high priority for Sam.
Well, they can't even really go private. Like, this is the part of the problem, is they're not private and they're not public. It's a really weird mix. But recently, they were able to get their employees to be able to sell off a lot of their shares. I'll be curious to see if that gets people to stay, or if that suddenly makes a whole bunch of rich people that want to leave.
Yeah, watching them have to unravel that will be very entertaining, but I don't know how long it'll take, or if it's a priority for them at all.
Well, if you quote Sam, he said on stage, 10 days ago, in his top 10 priorities, revenue is not one of them.
Yeah. So speaking of Sam, let's talk about this $300 billion that they don't have. So Oracle announced that they have the $300 billion of cloud computing with OpenAI in one of the largest deals in business history. Here's the problem. OpenAI didn't necessarily have $300 billion in cash. They're only worth $500 billion. So they're essentially giving 3/5 of their soul over to Oracle. And by OpenAI's own projections, they won't profit until 2030.
And that's at best.
Yeah, I really don't think they will even then. Oracle doesn't have the chips they needed to fulfill the contract or even the cash to buy those chips. Following the announcement, Oracle's market cap jumped nearly 50% in a week to approach $1 trillion based on a non-binding deal with a party that can't pay. Gary Marcus calls this the peak bubble, comparing it to people promising to build greenhouses for tulips during the 1636 tulip mania. Do you know much about that?
I don't. It's another one of these bubbles where everybody wanted tulips. That's about all the more I know. And yet, of course, everybody bought and everybody invested in these companies, basically pre-buying tulips that then for some reason I can't remember they, they didn't deliver. So.
Yeah, and then you have the Mira Murati raising $2 billion on her idea. And people calling that one of the most absurd business pitch meetings.
So one of the interesting things about Mira Murati is that this highlights how much the AI talent's worth, right? That's really what that highlights is. That's just highlighting the Mira Murati deal. Just highlights that if you have the talent, people are going to follow with money. And there's so much hype around it right now that if you can even just prove that you have the talent to be able to be competitive, it's going to put you into at least a room where you can have an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. There was an announcement last night that Google was also expanding what they were going to spend. Google, $9 billion. Okay. So Google was going to expand their spending by $9 billion. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Do you want to go over the JP Morgan piece?
Yeah, so we have an interesting part too. JP Morgan just announced, and something that's a lot more, to me, seems a lot more normal of a way to approach something like this. JP Morgan Chase says it will invest $10 billion in industries critical for national security. They said on Monday that it's launching a decade-long plan to help finance and take direct stakes in companies it considers crucial to U.S. interests. So the bank said in the statement it would invest up to $10 billion into companies in 4 areas: defense and aerospace, frontier technologies, including AI and quantum computing, energy technology, right, including batteries. So that's an interesting one, and supply chain and advanced manufacturing. So basically, JP Morgan wants to invest in shovels. Right.
Yeah.
In a gold rush, they're saying they're going to invest in shovels. Now they're going to invest some gold too. They're saying that the AI technology and quantum computing, but at the same time, they're investing in shovels. And so this is part of its broader effort dubbed the Security and Resiliency Initiative, in which JP Morgan said it will finance or facilitate $1.5 trillion in funding for companies it identifies as crucial, an amount it said was worth 50% more than a previous plan. Now, the $10 billion is pocket change for JP Morgan. That's definitely not something, they actually do have that money literally in the bank.
Yeah.
And so that's money that they can spend. So this isn't more of a real plan to me. I'm curious to hear how they execute it, but Damon is not an idiot. And so he's definitely proved to be, very savvy in these kind of spaces. And as America's biggest bank by assets and a Wall Street juggernaut, JP Morgan was already raised funds and lending money to companies in those industries. So it'll be interesting to see where that does go over the time. Are they going to do that as like a startup fund? Are they going to, so that's kind of where they're, it's an interesting counter to this, because this is somebody who actually has the money, and it seems like they're deploying a 10-year strategy, which sounds like a realistic timeline.
And it's funny that he did that, because just last week he said, yeah, we'll probably be in a recession by the end of next year. And so he just said it that so nonchalantly that for him to be able to pull the trigger on this spending, he either just thinks that the recession will be nominal. He doesn't care. It's a nominal amount of spending that'll get through it. I don't know. What do you think?
It's about, we'll see. I think his planning is definitely a call to, because everybody's been asking what they're going to do about it, and I think part of this is basically him saying they're going to sell shovels. Right? It's
Yeah,
worked for Nvidia. I don't know. You would argue whether the Nvidia is selling the shovel or the gold.
totally. Sweet. Okay, so late last night, well, I guess it was yesterday. I guess, yeah, late last night, Google announced that they're going to build a $9 billion campus in South Carolina. They said that uh, they've announced a $9 billion investment in South Carolina through 2027 to expand AI infrastructure in the state. This funding will expand our Berkeley County data center campus and support the continued construction of 2 new sites in Dorchester County. So there, Google also provide a grant for training program to prepare more than 160 apprentices for career in South Carolina's tech and energy sector. Do you think that, I mean, if you're a young buck listening, are you thinking that there is careers within managing these data centers, or do you think that these are that won't be a long-term career?
I do. So Google's playing the long game, right? Google's had DeepMind for a long time, even before the Chat GPT, blow up. And so Google's investing, and Amit in my comments here just actually says Google is building an AI hub in India, investing $15 billion to set up a new data center. I think AI is going to be a long game. And I think he's right. Google's definitely playing the long game on this, right? And this $15 billion hub of AI infrastructure hub is a huge play. And I think it's a really smart one. I think it's a great place to build on that. Somebody in Better Future AI in my comment says, in a bubble, OpenAI has signed on to about $1.2 trillion in deals and makes about $12 billion a year, right? And so that's the ratio we're trying to figure out here is, look, you're pitching to the future. Now, Google actually has $15 billion to spend, right? The Googles and the Metas of the world has that. OpenAI is pitching on what they could be.
Yeah.
And at some point, there's got to be a reckoning for a $1.2 trillion in deal to $12 billion a year. Like, those numbers just don't add up.
Yeah, here's the India announcement that they'll have a $15 billion hub.
Yeah.
Um,
See, now
so
that says 14,000 employees in India. And my guess is that number will continue to grow, as it should. I mean, I think, that establishes a very strong data center in that corner of the world that will be really important moving forward.
yeah,
And so I think these are long plays. These aren't bubble talk, right? Like, this kind of thing is not bubble talk. This is real stuff.
yeah, it's interesting you say that because all of OpenAI's deals are like between 6 to 10 gigawatts. And Google's like, yeah, it's going to be 1 gigawatt. And then we're slowly going to scale it to a few gigawatts. I think a lot of OpenAI's announcements are flashy. They want to get the jaw dropping 6 gigawatts, like, because that's, I mean, 1 gigawatt is digestible and seems very executable. 6 to 10 gigawatts just to start your deal open, like to start your deal out like that. I don't know. I'd put my money on Google to execute a plan like this faster than somebody else.
I would too. I mean, if anybody knows data centers and knows how to build infrastructure, it's Google, right? I
Yeah.
mean, who's been doing it bigger, longer? Microsoft, maybe, right? Microsoft's definitely a competitor in that space, but there's maybe, Facebook. There's really less than a dozen of these that actually know how to do this, right? And I think these kind of moves by Google is actually what will make them a cornerstone. And what'll end up happening is, I predict here is that you'll eventually see a lot of these companies turning to Google, to Microsoft, who know how to build these slowly and steady, and go, hey, we got this money. Like, can we buy some data center?
Yeah. I totally agree. So back to the career of data centers, is that something that if you were just graduating that you would look into becoming someone that managed data centers, that you became more boots on the ground for the data centers? Is that a real career? I don't know.
It is. I mean, I don't know how much of a big career that is. I think that's shovels versus gold. And I think the gold is the people who can learn to build stuff that's going to run in those data centers, the software, and learning how to, build the software on that. But learning how to optimize the hardware to be peak efficiency is a huge play, right? And we can only throw hardware at the problem for so long. And I mean, they're going to continue to do this, but we are reaching points of scale, and so even, there was this big deal that, that Jensen Huang, delivered this little mini, 1 teraflop computer that's, about this big,
Oh yeah, let me
and
pull it up really quick.
delivered it to Elon Musk. But part of this to remember about this too is that they announced that 18 months ago. So it's like we have to really ship real stuff, and that's kind of the thing at the end of it. And it's a neat package at $4,000, so it'll allow you to do a decent amount of AI computing just sitting right on your desk. But like I've had a playlist where I've showed you how to build one of the, build something, smaller for sure, but I mean for $500 that anybody can go get parts off the shelf and build. And so I think having skills like that to be able to take anything and to be able to build up like that is that's the real skill, and that's the one that I'd be telling people to be building at, because at the end of the day, while everybody's talking about all these big things, like learning to build on top of that. Yeah. So I mean, like this is neat and that's great, but that took NVIDIA over a year to even start to ship those, and you can't even get those still. Like I just went to look because I was curious to see how much that little device was actually worth, and people are saying that they're shipping for around 5,000, but you still can't get them.
Yeah.
I hit every one of the major distributors, and they don't even list a price yet. So, to say that they're shipping them is interesting. I do think that will become, I do think getting that computing down. So Microsoft built this game years and years ago, right? They gave away free software because Visual Studio at the time used to cost about $2,000 per license in the early 2000s for Visual Studio, but they gave it away to students. So this is kind of that, this is the play to say, hey, we want to get this, something computable into hands of developers quicker. And as they start to do that, this is where Huang's brilliance is. Like he's trying to get that to the developers, because if developers develop on things that need this level of compute, NVIDIA will need to continue to print money.
Yeah. So this is when Jensen Huang hand delivered another GPU to Elon in 2016 when he was at OpenAI. And then now you can see just how, it's 9 years and you can see how compute's condensed. And I think that this is 10x the compute difference and probably a 10% of the size.
Yep.
Right.
And we'll continue to see this, but to that point is it's like, one, you're not going to get much smaller. And there's a lot of people saying that until we get to quantum, you're just really not going to be able to get it much faster.
Yeah.
The new Blackwell chips are very impressive, but they really don't have a great announcement for what's coming behind them.
Yeah. So what do you like? Are they just going to, I guess we just wait and let NVIDIA innovate, see what they do. Do you know the next version after Blackwell?
I don't. There's an announcement. There's a name. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but to me, it's still so far off that they're just now starting to ship the Blackwells after a long time of announcements that I want to, let's continue to use this processing power. And that's what we're going to continue to need to see. So those are the GB10 chips, I think, is what he just delivered in that little device to Elon. But I think we're seeing some interesting strategic play because Huang wants to stay close to Elon because Elon's now going to be producing his own AI chips using Samsung, not NVIDIA. Right. And so everybody's trying to court these big players to try to be able to stay into the game because Eli's already got a deal for the AI5 and AI6 chips with Samsung.
Yeah.
Who's going to be producing them next door to him.
Gotcha. I saw this interesting article on Market Watch that I wanted to show. There was like 4 signs that were in an AI bubble. It says, oh no. Paywall. Dang it. Okay. Never mind. We'll skip that one for right now. We will talk about that next week. So if you haven't yet, subscribe.
And I think one of the big ones here is for the paywall is, that ratio, right? An OpenAI who's one that's clearly, so I can come up with 2 of them really quick. OpenAI, when you remember seeing that chart, OpenAI is the one that all the deals go through. If OpenAI collapses, that's going to affect everybody on that chart, right? The next part is that OpenAI is so overextended, it's a ratio that does not make any sense. The $1.2 trillion ratio to a $12 billion. Now, am I predicting that OpenAI is going to collapse? At this point, it's almost too big to collapse. And would the government even let them collapse? Because with like Stargate and things like that, there'll be some kind of bailout that'll come in the form of some investment because it's not in anybody's interest on those charts for OpenAI to collapse.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. I had it up on my phone. Dang, I thought it was a good article too. I can't seem to pull it up right now, but I guess we'll talk about it next week. Okay, I wanted to pick your brain on AI depreciation because you're seeing this is where the accounting funny numbers can come in, is because you'll see somebody spend money on chips, but that money won't show up. I think you can depreciate it for 7 years. Let me go ahead and pull it up.
Well, and so the interesting thing about that is, so like just that little device that Jensen Huang, announced over a year ago, and then delivered some of the very first ones. Because trust me, he was itching to get that thing over to Elon, signed and gold and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And yet they still can't even get their hands on them. So we're probably 6 months from general consumers being able to get them. So it's 18 months, and yet that device is only good for 3 to 5 years before it's obsolete.
Yeah. No, it's so let's dig into that. So GPUs, we're thinking GPUs have a useful life of about 3 years, but do you think that's even true with like the 5090s and the 4090s?
We're gonna see. I mean, that's kind of the thing, is it's predicted right now. So if you look back on a chip that is 5 years old right now, which really is about the 3 series, right? The 3060, the 3090.
Yeah.
Anything previous to that really is not useful by today's standards. The 3060 and 3090s even are starting to become marginally with the new announcements of the 5090s. But if you're a lower cost and you want to build something out at lower cost, and you maybe don't need a 5090s worth of compute, the 3090 is a great option to fall back on. And there's still tons of new ones shipping. I mean, Amazon still lists these, and they're still very popular with a ton of shipping. I don't have numbers on it, but you can clearly see they're shipping a ton of these, and those still sell for $1,000 a pop, right? And so if you're a small company and you want to build out some good AI power, in the 2,000 to 3,000 range, you can do that. But how long that's going to stay relevant, I mean, they're already, some would argue, is not as relevant, because you have to have really 2 of them to build a lot of really powerful stuff.
Yeah. I think the depreciation aspect, because financially you can depreciate it for 7 years, but then you're needing to replace it at 3 years. So
yeah. I mean, you could even say that you can stretch it out to 5, but even still, your accounting numbers still don't make sense if you're depreciating something at 7 years that you're still not even using by year 5.
Yeah, that will be something. I mean, so you really think there's nothing like, you can't have those older GPUs, you can't move them to like lower tier tasks and just step up? I don't know.
I mean, obviously you can, and in a lot of intelligent computing, for a lot of our clients, and I've preached here on this channel for a long time, to not do real-time AI processing, right? To do AI processing in the background. As you do AI processing in the background and pre-process things using AI, using ML, using data science, and using these chips for that, yes, they will be useful for probably up to 10 years. But that's not what these guys are investing in. If you're one of these top 50 players, you're not going for something that you're just doing. You're going for cutting edge stuff. You're wanting to push the envelope. You're wanting to push. And when it gets to inference, power to watt is everything.
Yeah. To kind of wrap up here, I wanted to go over one of these last points that we have here, that the ROI reckoning is coming. Companies have poured money and are continuing to pour money into AI on the faith that during this hype cycle, even without clear KPIs, which are key performance indicators or success metrics to measure actual returns. So executives who have now approved millions of dollars in AI spending or billions of dollars in AI spending are going to start having to ask and answer uncomfortable questions. What did we actually get for that money we spent? The gap between demos and production implements that deliver measurable value is massive. Pilots and demos are easy, but scaling to profitability is an entirely different game. History shows that the boom cycles can deliver long-term values, even if they crash first. The telecom fiber eventually got used. The railroads did transform America, but the crash comes when companies can't show ROI fast enough to justify continued investment at current levels. So a question is, how long are these executives going to get the green light to buy the latest and greatest NVIDIA chips, right?
And that's exactly the question, right? And so clearly everybody's like, oh, you're saying AI is a bubble, it's going to go away. That's not what we're saying, right? We're saying that there's a gap between the reasoning of the dollars to the cents, not, both cents and cents, right? But, there's just like when you have OpenAI that has a $1.2 trillion committed and then it's making $12 billion a year, right? Those are orders of magnitudes difference of numbers. The accounting doesn't make sense. And when the accounting doesn't make sense, that defines a bubble. Does that mean OpenAI is going to go away? I kind of doubt it. Like we said, they're almost too big to fail. Is AI going away? No, there's a lot of useful technology there, and a lot of people like Startup Hack here. We're building a lot of AI value for every one of our clients, right? And so we're using it in real ways. What drives me crazy is the hype cycle and these crazy numbers, right? Because you're seeing companies that do one thing with AI and getting sold for multiple billions of dollars. Like we've never seen this ratio of hype before.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, I'm really curious to hear what you think about Sora. They've hit some insane app downloads and then some insane watch hours. I mean, one creator alone, one of the Paul brothers, had 6,500 Sora videos posted with him and got 1 billion views. How are these views going to be just as valuable as original content? People seem to not care as much as everybody would have thought.
That's an interesting part of the hype too, because the other part of this too is what's going to happen when, I mean, the lawsuits are already mounting, right? Like quickly, and they're in the multiple billions of dollars range already against OpenAI for just, and OpenAI has thumbed their nose to them and said, we don't really care. So it's like at some point that reckoning has to happen. They've thrown copyright out the window.
It might sound like nails on a chalkboard to you, but I actually listened to Sam Altman's podcast on Friday where he was with the head of Sora, and they were talking about what they're doing, and they didn't talk about the issues at all. They just said when they talk to creators that try to get them to take their stuff down, they actually end up converting to Sora and really liking it. I do think that right now the initial
I think that's a pile of crap, but
I do too. I think that I think that most people are not going to want to be on here, but just like social media, how it took the legacy actors a while to get onto social media, I do think you will start to see a new generation of creators that learn how to monetize this. I think it's like the TikTok boom again. I do think that this will be a monetizable avenue, that eyeballs are the most valuable currency. And the fact that Sora beat ChatGPT and is arguably just as monetizable with ad spending, I think that Meta could do really well in this space. I think I think Meta could beat Sora and they could monetize it better. So if Meta wanted to really get on the radar, I think that they could do something better in that range. I refuse to download Sora and use it. That may just be my generation or just me. I refuse to, just because like I already have to like force myself not to scroll enough, that scrolling to AI just sounds ridiculous. It sounds like something that my father would not have raised me to do.
And that's, but we're actually seeing an interesting pullback though, because actually social media across the board is seeing a pullback. I wish I should have kept those numbers, but I was watching something that says that we're seeing that the social media peaked in 2022, like the tail end of the pandemic. And since then it's been almost a 20% pullback across the board on social media. Now it's still there. And that's part of the reason why Sora is literally the definition of AI slop. And everybody's actually finding, that, yeah, I mean, because he's Jake Paul, right? Like, okay, anything Jake Paul is going to say is going to like do that. But this is literally the definition of AI slop and mindless drivel. Like it just literally is.
Yeah, no, I agree. But we also did think TikTok was just a dancing platform, and now it's become one of the most weaponized social, like it's become a weapon of politics.
I get it, but you really think Disney's going to stand by and let them continue to use all their copyrighted material?
I don't know. I don't know, but I think that the numbers are hard to argue against. That it's valuable.
Yeah, you can say that all you want, but if it's illegal, it's going to get shut down.
We'll see. We will see. Cool. Well, that's all I had today. There was just like a lot of little stories this week. And we do our best to cover and try to add context to what goes on in the world. We have Startup Hack here. Startup Hack, where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
If you need help building out systems for your company, getting your systems connected so you can work to maximum efficiency, check out startuphack.com/Spencer because we'd love to help you out.
Perfect. Awesome. We go live every Tuesday morning. If you guys wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, we really appreciate it. Leave a comment. Let us know your favorite part, where you agree, where you disagree. We really appreciate you guys. And like always, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.